Okay. I call to order this instructional work group meeting March 3rd. Today we will, let me just, Word docs just out. Sorry, y'all. Okay. Okay. So today we will be having our updates on mental health and well-being. And we have our students here today. And then we will also be having a conversation around second semester class sizes, the reports, an updated report on that. And so, yeah, Dr. Goddard, would you like to start us out today?
Hey, Maya, do you want to do the minutes first?
Oh, minutes, huh? Okay, I'll go to the minutes, sorry. Do you have any public comment, Jesse?
No public.
Okay. Okay, so I move to approve the minutes from the instructional work group meeting dated February 3rd, 2025.
Second.
Second, Sabian. And then I'll biscuits. So we're just approving the minutes. Okay. All those in favor of approving February 3rd, 2025. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
6-0. Passes. Thanks, y'all. Okay, now, Dr. Goddard, kick us off.
Great. Thank you, board members. Looking forward to this afternoon's presentation. I'll turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Green in a minute, but I'm always grateful when our students and staff can join us to share the great work they're doing, perhaps challenges they're facing, and to us to be part of their team of support and looking for ways to always improve the experiences for our students and our school communities. I know they've been doing a lot of hard work. I also know that they've been presented with a lot of challenges from their peers and from the community around them in terms of what we face from time to time. So I look forward to hearing our students engage with us tonight. And that'll turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Green.
Thank you so much, Dr. Goddard, and thank you so much, Board Chair Pearson. Before we go into the slides, I just want to take a minute to introduce the team that we have here tonight. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. We have Leah Esser, Dr. Leah Esser, who's our Executive Director of Student and Staff Supports, Dr. Kristen Getchow, who is our Director of Mental Health and Wellbeing. We have 4 amazing students here tonight that are going to share some of their experiences. We all know Megan, she's our school rep, but she is part of our presentation tonight. We have Kara, who is over at Capitol High. And then we have Lena Cox and we have Lily Shapiro, who both co-chair our Student Senate and really are focusing on our mental health community. With that, I just want to draw the board's attention to a supplemental document that you have in front of you. It is also linked to Board Docs, which is the February mental health newsletter that was put together by Lena and Lily, and they will talk a little bit about this. But it's part of the work that they've really been focused on that we're really grateful. We also have many members of our mental health team kind of row behind us that are part of the amazing work that happens every day for our students and schools. Jesse, you could go ahead and. But you could go to the next slide. As always, making sure that we ground ourselves in our 3 strategic framework goals, our current goals that we have right now. Every child is on track to graduate college, career, and community ready. Our district and every school in it is a place where our children, staff, and families thrive. African-American children and youth excel in school. I think our conversation tonight really underpins all 3 of those goals and the importance of mental health and well-being in order for us to realize any one of these goals. Next slide, please. So as Dr. Goddard mentioned, and as I said a little, tonight we're going to really be focusing on understanding our progress by including youth and community voice into the impact of mental health initiatives that we have, and also next steps for continuing to make those improvement efforts. what we learn and hear from our students tonight is a huge part of how we're going to continue to think about our improvement and grow as a community. Next slide, please. I wanted to make sure that we also uplift our district improvement goals. As I mentioned before, mental health and well-being really underpins all three of these goals. Is absolutely essential for our students, our staff, our community to be well and to feel physically and psychologically safe in order for any of these three goals to be realized. Tonight, we will spend probably more time with the focus on an emphasis on goal 2 based on some of the work that Megan has done with students that she'll talk about what she's learning in terms of attendance and the mental health component. So we're really looking forward to that. Next slide, please. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Getchow. She's going to kick us off and walk through a few slides before we turn it over to her students.
Thanks, Cindy. And thanks everybody for the invite to be here. And thanks for youth for being here today. What an honor it is to be sitting alongside you. So with this first slide, I want to just take us back to about starting at the beginning. So mental health is a hot topic in the media right now. It's something that we hear about a lot. But what do we mean in MMSD if we're talking about mental health? So first of all, we really zoom out and think about mental health as a continuum, which goes from stress to well-being, right? We all have mental health. Like this is just something that we all live in and experience every day. And like Dr. Underwood refers to here, it's an asset which can be taught and supported, thus aligning to our district's goals and values of supporting students to thrive. Second, we really work to align our vision and our resources to state and national best practices. So we use a comprehensive approach supported by mindset, people, programs, which strengthen our schools. Next slide, please, Jessie. To zoom in a little bit closer to the details of our MMSD approach, we have a wealth of resources in MMSD. Thank you, board. You have been ongoing supporters of this for as long as I can remember. We really are grateful for that. We continue to work to build a strong, reliable, sustainable infrastructure for our programs, practices, and each of our schools across all levels. We really want to make sure that students are experiencing the supports no matter what grade they're in, no matter what school they're in, and that it can be relied on no matter what the context is happening out in the universe. So I need to start here by recognizing that none of this work happens without our student services staff. So our school psychologists, our school social workers, our nurses, our counselors, they're building relationships every single day with students and families, and they're implementing this work every day. And by the way, happy School Social Work Week to any school social workers in the room or listening. A few other points to share here. All of our work to support students' mental health and well-being is entwined with other school and district priorities, as Cindy was sharing as she introduced this topic. Building relationships, creating strong, welcoming school communities, teaching problem solving and social emotional skills, and students engaging in rich learning experiences. That all contributes to mental health and well-being. We also want to highlight that we build on that work by thoughtfully tending to different buckets of work, as are highlighted here, such as teaching adults mental health literacy skills, working to recognize when students need something more by our universal screening process, and then creating and communicating strong pathways to referral and supports in the schools and the community, as well as building a strong library of its school-based individual and group interventions. So we really look at this work across quite a scope of practices, and they're all needed to build that reliable infrastructure that I was talking about. Next slide, Jessie. We are really proud of the scope of services available to our students, and we are always intentionally examining our practices to remove barriers of access to traditionally underserved communities and ease of access to all. Certainly something we heard loud and clear from our students in our community was that something that we need to work on, and that's something we need to work on. We've been working hard this year to continue to gather youth and community voice. And what's important to the students, and rightly so, is that then they see some action to respond to their input. Tonight, we're going to give a few updates and step back and hear from the youth themselves. Next slide. So one way that we hear from our youth, and we're focusing now on the screening at the systems level that affects us at the system level, is that we do engage in the Dane County Youth Assessment. This is a county-wide youth assessment in its 44th year. I remember taking this at DeForest High School, you know? So, Megan, when you were talking about how the students engage with this, I remember being in that seat. So we get this data every 3 years, and this year, we have data from over 6,000 Madison high school and middle school students. That's unique just at Madison, but the county sample is much larger. This data really helps us to learn from trends over time and reflect and make adjustments. It also helps us to ground in more localized data amongst the larger national narratives. It really helps us to really talk about what's happening right here in Madison and right here in Dane County. This supports our work at the larger systems level. In one example, we're seeing a trend of returning to lower levels of symptoms in the arenas of suicidal ideation, anxiety, and depression. There are still many areas of concern. I'm not trying to undersell any of the concerns that are out there. And I believe that this gives us some reason to hope and to believe that youth are receiving some of what they need to get their feet back underneath them post-COVID. So that's a really important piece of data that we're keeping an eye on. We're going to share an example of how we're using some of this data a bit later today when we turn this over to Megan. Next slide. Another way that we use screening is on the individual level. A key part of our mental health and well-being practices are universal social emotional screening at the 3rd, 6th, and 6th grades and at high school. Here's a snapshot of this year's data. So far this year, student service teams have screened over 5,000 of our students. What that allows us to do is to get a snapshot of how students are doing, gives us a chance to follow up with students who are signaling that they need more, and work with students and families to match the stated need with appropriate school or community interventions. Next slide. Moving from screening to navigation and offering supports post-screening. Besides some of our key practices, which give us the ongoing data that I was just highlighting, the data assessment, our universal screening, we also rely on our university partners to support answering some key questions. In the example that I'm sharing here, we've been working with Journey Mental Health Center for 20 years with our CBITS program. So they support our universal screening and interventions through their REST CBITS program. While we believe we have a strong screening and follow-up practices, we wanted to learn more about the factors which lead to a student to engage in the CBITS intervention group. So if they've been screened in, what is going to help them decide yes, they're going to join that intervention group, and no, thank you. Katie Eklund from the UW School Psychology Program and some of her students in partnership with MMSD and Journey engaged with our students in focus groups to learn more. We have a rich data set that we're just starting to dig into, but early results indicate that we need to continue to focus on relationships, clear communication with students, including about confidentiality, and really thinking about logistics and scheduling barriers. And this will all be things that we'll use to inform future professional development and practices. Next slide. In the arena of strong pathways to referral, a place of clear and continued advocacy was from the Board of Education Ad Hoc Committee and now the District's Wellness Advisory. We continue to work to implement and refine our approach from their feedback, including ongoing progress with our mental health therapists in our 4 comprehensive high schools. The data that's here is from our first semester with three therapists in our comprehensive high schools. We're excited to say we now have a 4th therapist hired and placed. All of this builds on the longstanding work of behavioral health in schools, which is now in its 10th year, currently in 16 schools. And we're in the planning stages of expansion for the 25-26 school year for the BHS program. So that's something that the board has supported for quite a long time, and we're seeing the benefits of all that work. Okay, next slide. Now for the part I'm really excited about. I get to introduce you to Lily and Lena, who are co-chairs of the Mental Health Subcommittee of the Student Senate. Student Senate has been prioritizing mental health for some time now. The president of Student Senate created a mental health subcommittee this year. And here are Lily and Lena describing some of their work.
Hi, I'm Lena. I'm Lily. We're both sophomores at West High School. Yes. So we the mental health committee for a couple of reasons. Obviously, as students, we have individual connections to mental health. It's a big issue, I think you could say, in the schools. And we both agree that there is a shared importance of sharing resources with students who might not know that they exist, and just increasing awareness, stigmatizing them.
And I think we've all seen how mental health can affect people that we love and in our families and our friends. And I mean, it's just really prominent now, not talked about enough in our schools. So for our goals as the committee was to destigmatize mental health and also share resources. So for the past couple of months, we've been doing mental health monthly releases, which I think you guys all have now, February release. So we're distributing this information over email, through social media platforms, Instagram, and we even have it on the MSD mental health website now, the student corner.
We've been working really hard as a committee, us and also the rest of our committee members, sort of pick topics that are important to us and get to write about. We're also planning on having a mental health fair at the 6 high school. This will be in May. We're still very much in the planning stage, so there's very little that's sort of planned out. But this is a goal of ours to destigmatize mental health, bring more conversations, more students, get resources, get information.
Yeah, and we're currently working on this with Kristen, Danny, Jay, Dr. Gothard, and Susie, the head counselor. And we hope that we can foster student involvement and more discussion about it. Yeah. Our next steps as a committee be to continue the releases through May, possibly also June. May is National Mental Health Awareness Month. That's why we're targeting May. And then obviously continue planning the mental health fair. And then also we talked about doing a mental health summit possibly in April.
So at the summit, we would help plan it and then also get students from across the different high schools to sort of have some conversations about mental health, see what they would maybe be interested in us as a subject to do, and then maybe also share that information with Kristen.
Thank you all for being here and thank you for that, that snapshot. I'm so excited about that work. Next slide, Jesse. So last but not least, I get to bring this back around to our student board rep, Megan. Megan had a vision of speaking directly to her fellow students this year around important issues. She'll describe her project in more detail, but one of the questions she asked students about was this data from the Dane County Youth Assessment about why students are feeling anxious. And I'll let her talk about this, but we've just loved working with Megan and her amplifying student voices to dig deeper into the data, which will then wrap into our continuous improvement practice. With that, I'm turning this over to Megan, one of the students she interviewed, Cara.
Awesome, thank you so much. So yes, this on the screen is the top 3 reasons students report for feeling anxious in 2024. And when this project got started, we knew we wanted to talk to different high schoolers. So myself and Laura, sorry, I'm right behind you. Visited West Capitol High in La Follette and talked with several students ranging in grades, socioeconomic backgrounds with chronic absenteeism rates of 50 to 80%, kind of depending. So a pretty diverse crowd altogether. And when we asked them, like, does this look accurate to you? What do you think of this? What would you change? The answer was essentially across the board, it's accurate. Next question. There wasn't a lot of feedback on things that they would change. This is accurate according to them. So could we go to the next slide, please? So, thank you so much. Okay, yeah, so we did a series of interviews. Students essentially got to pick who they brought into the interview with them. So for some students, that was a social worker. For some students, they decided to do it with a bilingual resource specialist. Some students just came in by themselves or with their friends if they also fell into this category with their absenteeism. So when we kind of talked about their absenteeism, a couple different trends popped out. So the first is the key struggle lies within getting students to attend class. No matter how long their commute is, they are showing up on campus every single day, or most days, but they are not actually attending class. So, that's like issue number one, and there is a really big theme of intentionality behind skipping class. Every single student is performing a cost benefit analysis for every single class that they were able to take me through in the interview. And they had me saying like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, yep, I understand like why this decision makes sense for you and what you're going through at this moment. So it's not an afterthought. Like there is some very clear planning that goes into skipping class. So community was also seen as a reason to attend or skip class. So some students felt that like after skipping class for a day or more and returning to school, if their teacher didn't notice that they were gone, they didn't feel the need to come back to that classroom. They didn't feel supported. They didn't feel that sense of belonging. But if they had a teacher that they knew was going to bring the energy and really try to connect with them, even if they really didn't like what that class topic was, they would attend as often as they could. Similarly, every student was able to cite a trusted adult at school, which was huge, and multiple of brought that trusted adult into their interview. And you have some incredibly talented staff and social workers and counselors, and I really hope you know that they are making a huge difference in the lives of these kids, these students. Finally, positive reinforcement has better results than negative repercussions when it comes to conversations about absenteeism. Multiple students were able to cite conversations that they've had where they were fully ready to enter the school building and go into class, and somebody called them out on their previous absences, and suddenly that desire just went away. They, went into the bathroom for majority of the day, or they just left campus altogether. There was no longer that desire to learn. But for students at Capitol High, multiple also cited the program where if you are on time, you get prizes. And multiple students said like, yes, that is something that I will actively, be at school more in order to, get pizza. So yeah. So then we kind of transitioned into talking about mental health. And multiple students, regardless of school, noted discomfort and vulnerability surrounding conversations with mental health. Many had not been asked about their mental health ahead of this interview, and so this was a very new topic. So coping skills included listening to music or spending time with their friends, spending time on a cell phone, either like social media or otherwise, and eating comfort food. And for many students, that comfort food is not school food. That is something that they bring from home or leave campus to go get. And then third was students noted that the combination of school stress paired with smaller things created a pattern of dread that just kept building, and eventually resulted in burnout. So like weeks worth of not attending school, or not attending class, and like lower attendance rates. So for example, a student said that, okay, like underlying stressors for me are work, homework, and conversations I have with my parent about skipping class. Those are things I'm always stressed about. But as those start building and the procrastination and the stress starts piling up, suddenly the school bell is too loud. Or I really notice that temperature change when we go from classroom to classroom. Or I don't know, the chair I'm sitting in, it just like teeters a little bit, and I notice that a lot more now. And then there's not that desire to be there anymore. It just leads to burnout. They don't want to be there, and it leads to dread. So what we learned and what we're really hoping for the future is youth voice is essential to supporting our schools. And by having conversations and interviews and focus groups, more and more students are able to provide really meaningful feedback into the programs that we already have in place and the problem areas that we're seeing as a district, or improvement areas rather. So what we would like to ask of you is to focus on having more youth-led interviews in the future, or youth-led opportunities for students to converse. Just because it's really not the same as a student talking to an adult. So students engage in a spectrum of coping strategies and coping mechanisms. And as a district, we need to ensure that we are supporting these students and creating spaces that allow these students to access and engage in these strategies. So I'm going to turn it over to Cara, who I was incredibly fortunate to have been able to spend some time with interviewing. And Cara is going to share a little bit more about their personal experience at Capitol High, her personal experience at Capitol High, and what that's like.
When it comes to mental health and support people and adults at the school, I really feel like Capitol High has done a lot better than the other schools that I've been at. Kelly and my teacher Jessie, they really are talking to me because I'm a mom and trying to figure out what they can do to help me when it comes to my attendance or my homework, or just working with me with that, because when I go home, I'm the only one taking care of my son. So they have to take that into account, and they do. And I feel like if I was at another school, and when I was at other schools, that wasn't how it was. They're like, okay, this is the standard for everybody else, so this is what I need you to do. And they seem to be able to work with me while still keeping me within the requirements. And I really appreciate that from Capitol High.
Perfect. I think you have anything else you want to add?
Not really, I can turn it.
All right, I'll finish us off. So tonight we centered our youth voices in a way we haven't before. And this opportunity really allowed us to assess our impact of our mental health work and really truly consider our next steps for, next slide, for our equity-driven, data-informed improvements. I want to just I'm not gonna say how much I'm grateful because it'll make me cry. But I want to just thank the four of you so much for being here tonight, but also for all of the work that you did leading up to this conversation. You have been transformative for me as a leader in thinking about voice differently. See, I told you I get verklempt. Our students have been really, really clear with us. They need relationships, they need communication, and they need us to have universal practices that are designed to shape their well-being. They see what's missing, they recognize when their voices drive change, and they know when we are authentic in our commitment and that our actions reflect that commitment. There's great power in what we heard tonight. It's not just in the perspectives we heard related to mental health, but really how we apply this concept of our student voice and Megan's call to action. We're not just we're really reimagining how we're centering youth in our decision-making. Our youth drive us to challenge and refine our practices. They push us to strengthen our programs, and they help us to ensure our schools and our school-based staff are equipped with the evidence-based supports that really adapt to the emerging needs of the school, the student, and best practice in the work that we do. So in addition to listening and hearing our students, I want to reinforce that it's beyond that. We are committed to acting with purpose and intention and listening to youth in a different way. So we will continue to evaluate and expand what works. We remain committed to sustaining core programs, and we are steadfast in ensuring consistent and high quality support for our students. So I thank you all for being part of this critical work. And again, thank you so much to our students for being here, Dr. Getchow and her team as well for all of the hard work. And I just want to thank Laura directly for the work that she did with Megan going out into our schools and facilitating that. The logistics of that alone are an undertaking.
We had
So
fun.
thank you all, and I will turn it back over to Cindy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Esser. Thank you, our brilliant students for sharing just a glimpse into both the experiences, and Megan for your vision to kind of make this a different way we think about your voice here, both within the board meetings, but also across the schools. Two that I just want to reference before I turn it over to Board Chair Pearson is one, we did provide the Dane County Youth Assessment, the full report for the board in board docs. So you have that, so you could see exactly what was said. And as Krista mentioned, we do it every 3 years, and we're in the 40th year of doing it, 44th. And then just in addition to that, back to Youth Voice, Friday, we had our second RJ Summit that was led by students, designed by students, run by students. And so it was just another way that we see the power of student voice. And we as adults, I think, have to just continue to figure out how we don't have these in just certain moments in time and just in events, but how this is kind of the way we move forward. So I'm just grateful for the students for being here tonight, and also those that participated in leading a really amazing student voice opportunity this Friday. So with that, I think we'll open it up to questions, and I'll turn it back to Pearson. I keep wanting to say Mulder because I'm so used to that. That's what I'm like. Pearson.
Yeah.
Pearson.
Okay, yeah, you all can stay with us just in case folks have questions, so opening it up. Any questions for our students or update? Laura?
I'll start with two pretty easy questions, at least one really easy question. Megan, I'm wondering how many people you need?
120. Yeah, 120, I think total. And there were more high schools that wanted more of Megan's time, but we also had to hire Megan's a student as but more people were interested in interviewing, and more students were interested as well. So we've talked about how we can continue to interview more students.
Fantastic. So one of the things that I heard you say that caught my interest was that two of the reasons people stated for not wanting to come to class were related to temperature and how comfortable their seat was. And those are both sensory issues. And I'm wondering if any other sensory related issues came forward in these conversations.
So, in having these conversations with students, I was not, I didn't see like their IC or anything like that. So I didn't really know if any of them fell into like the special education umbrella. That being said, I think when I was talking about how like the chairs or the temperature, the bell, the things the sensory things that started popping up were after there were increased like feelings of dread or just exhaustion or burnout, and they were already less engaged. Like, they weren't saying they noticed that every single day, but I think they were trying to get at, and I may have phrased this poorly, so I apologize, but they don't notice those things until they're already just like out of it and don't want to be there, and then they start noticing it more, and it increases their desire to not want to be in class, if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. And I'm seeing a lot of adult heads nodding. And so I'm wondering if there has been a connection made between people who are more sensory aware and a reluctance to put themselves in a classroom.
I can start. I think Laura, your point is a really good one, right? All of those other external factors that come into play within a classroom, whether a student has a disability or not, that environment can really drive and dictate your engagement, your comfort, and your willingness and interest in being there. I think that when we're looking at student needs, we're looking at environmental factors within a classroom too. So if a student's struggling or somebody's articulating a need, we're really pushing to think about environmentally what's happening in the space and how can we support students? And then also centering their voices of like, what is actually happening in this space that is challenging? And so while it's not necessarily a fully systemic approach, that is how we think about it in many senses. And then there are deeper sensory work that we can do outside of that in consultation with our occupational therapists or other professionals. The thing I would also add though, is as we're thinking about the new building for our referendum, things like this are very much on our mind. So thinking about those spaces, but also like the sounds and the way that the lights are situated or how noise travels. So all really important considerations. And I think lots of different ways.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's all I have right now.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Any other questions? Go ahead, Blair.
Thank you. Thanks for coming and talking and for all your work. Burnham's too. I have a question and then a couple of things that I noticed that I thought were interesting and I wanted to just put in the room in conversation with my board colleagues. I think my first question is, Dr. Esther, when you talk about universal practices, I can't remember exactly the phrase that you put, like support or build student mental health, like what kind of stuff are you talking about?
Yeah, just overall well-being. So thinking about, for example, Megan talked about what students do and use for their own self-regulation. So it might be listening to music or using your phone. And so really being more attuned to what our students are telling us they need and thinking differently about the parameters of how schools work. So thinking generally like, what are the practices, the conditions that need to be in place within our school in order for students to feel well. Kristen, Dr. Getchell, if you could talk a little bit more about some of those really concrete universal pieces that you talked about in the earlier, that I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, so I always think about that, well, we all need to have a sense of safety, right? And that will, like, once we have, as we increase all of those all those pieces, then that raises the bar for all of us, right? And I was thinking too, Laura, about your board members, about your question about like, right, there's different ways to like manage the sensory issues. And one of the things is decreasing stress and increasing coping, right? Like, how do we do both of those? And so some of the things is just teaching the skills, right? How are we teaching the coping skills? But there's also things about how are we walking into a building and feeling safe and seen and heard, and have a sense of belonging, and that we've got relationships with the staff that you all were talking about. Like that all supports mental health and well-being. And sometimes we don't think about that as being mental health and well-being. We think about how many therapists do we have? But we really need to think about those base layers of safety and well-being that will support all of us, no matter kind of what mental health journey we're in on that day or as so.
And I really appreciated you saying that students engaging in rich learning experiences is part of what supports general mental health for all students. And I'm thinking about like, I'm right, universal practices is it, like I'm so excited about the strategic planning efforts. I'm so excited to like see some of these things. Like you've heard me say it a million times that like you have a job and you have a job and you have a job and you have a job, and then students go to school and they experience the product of all of your jobs all at once. And so like if they're getting one thing about this and another thing about this and another thing about this, like it doesn't actually function. And so I'm looking forward to hearing more as your work continues about how those universal practices that you're seeing are like laid right on top of our professional development plans or our like teaching framework or whatever. The other thing that I'm thinking about is something that you said that your teachers at CAP say, well, this is standard for everyone else, so I need you to do it. And I'm thinking about how many students have that experience. And they say, no, I want to meet the standards. Like I want to learn all the stuff, but I got to show it in a different way. And I'm like, in my experience, more and more students are seeking that, right? Are saying, maybe I don't have extenuating circumstances, but I still want to be seen as an individual who can meet these standards in my way. And so to me, that says there's like lots of openings as we think about what students are telling us they need for personalized learning. And with that, you know, Blair's favorite portfolio graduation stuff. And then the last thing that stood out to me, like mostly, I didn't hear you talking so much about cell phones, which surprised me. I heard you talk about it as a coping strategy, and like, look, I'm 40, so I'm also totally obsessed with my phone. But like, all the research out there says that like cell phones are really bad for teenagers. And so I'm curious about that not being mentioned, or what your students' feelings about that are, and what the adults are thinking and talking about around that.
I think start with, yeah.
Right.
No, thanks.
I think in the conversations, and well, please share as well, but in the conversations that I had with students, they acknowledge that there were some negative effects of being on the cell phone, where sometimes if they're doing it too late, can't sleep, and it affects school the next day, or life the next day, or whatever they're working on. When we were talking about coping mechanisms and cell phones in the classroom, it was the way to tune out the kind of the rest of the world. So it was something that they could focus on that wasn't as mentally intensive or just like hard, I think. And it wasn't always social media, which I think when I think of like, okay, like cell phones are bad, it's sometimes is tied to social media. Sometimes it can just be like texting a friend and having a conversation, like while you're in class, or sometimes it's just like putting in both earbuds and watching a movie. So it's not, I don't know. I think it's a way to tune out the rest of the world, while still being physically in class, even if they don't want to be. Yeah. Carolina, Lily, please add.
I mean, at home, my phone usage has definitely changed because I got a little dude who I need to track when his last diaper was changed. So I don't use it as much as I used to. And I am not like, oh, social media is super cool anymore. Because of that, I had to spend a lot of time like, oh, I love every single phone. But I think that being on the phone definitely can affect like our learning in general. A lot of times students do just like want to tune everything out. But other times they just want to be on their phones, and for some reason they want to bother the whole class. I can hear your music. I just want to do my classwork. But it's not all of them. It's not even most of them. Some of them just like being a bother to the teacher. But that's like a good like 10%. So it's not, to me, it's not as bad as some of the other things that are affecting us. And I think that's a lot of why it didn't show up like as a major, this is an issue when you look at student surveys. There's other problems.
I appreciate that reality check. Thank you.
If I can build on Megan, I think also it could also be like the nearest support that people can get. And it's a student's way of like finding support that they know they're comfortable with, whether it's like reaching out to family or friends, or if it's just like, I know social media isn't always the best, but like sometimes it's the closest thing that you have that people can like find comfort in, I guess. So I think that's also part of the reason why people use their phones so much.
Thanks.
What Lily was saying, I think with like the comfort thing, sometimes like the work is just like I can't start it now. So like going on your phone or just talking with a friend is a way of, or maybe you're like reading an email, who knows? But it's like a way of doing something, but it's not starting the homework, which feels so overwhelming. Like it's so hard to actually begin it. So if you do something productive while being on your phone or not, it's a way of getting something done, even if it's not the assignment.
Yeah, I think from just the adult perspective, I so appreciate that. I mean, I think a couple of things. I think this phone can be therapeutic and I think it can also be decompressing. I think about the way like I decompress after a long day. I don't have social media, but I could sit on my phone and like look at it to help me like, decompress and get myself together. I think for our schools also, as we figure out, meeting the needs of students, I think, many of our schools have found a balance around ensuring that our cell phone policy is intact, but that the balance of when phones are accessible in classrooms, so that it isn't this all or none type of thing, but it's the use your phone when this or need to be able to check out. So I feel like, and that's a blanket statement, but I do think that we're seeing that much more across our schools, this balance around kind of cell phone use, and not saying that we should never have it, because there's also emergencies and things like that, but the use of it and when it's appropriate. So I feel like that's something that our schools have really to work on, and we're seeing a lot of productivity with that.
That's such good news. Okay, those are my questions and noticings, and I appreciate your, thanks.
And thank you.
Michelle can go.
Okay, go ahead.
Well,
Or
first,
President Michelle.
whatever. First of all, I wanna just thank you so much for, giving us voice and perspective on what it's like to be a student and to try to hear more about how students are understanding this thing called mental health and like what it means to connect to resources. So the one thing I'm wondering about, and this is really for the students. So I heard in the presentation that we do a good job of screening. We have the Dane County Health Assessment, which is a survey, and then we have some targeted interventions, right? People who are getting in for a therapy, session or connecting. What I'm wondering though is that if you've taken the assessment or the survey and you're not in the therapy-based intervention, what are you learning about how students understand what the resources are? You know what I mean? Like, are you learning that students generally are like, I have no idea where I would go if I thought I might have something I wanted to talk about, or you know what I mean? Or like I might be having something that I need to like think more seriously about, or do you find that students do know how to access the resources?
I think students often do know how to, it's just a matter of whether they want to or not. I think, opening up the discussion, what we've been trying to do is get more like students with it and maybe hear more about student like experience and resources to know that they're not like alone or anything.
Okay.
But, I know everyone knows that we have counselors and therapists that are there for them. I'm just not sure if, I think a lot of students aren't as open to going and meeting with counselors,
Okay.
but yeah.
Adding on to what Lou was saying, it can be intimidating as well. Not only admit something isn't going well, but then going to an adult who's, sometimes feels like, oh my gosh, there's so much above me, and saying, this is something that we need to have this conversation about. And so I think with us trying to do it, student to student, that relationship feels a little bit safer,
Yeah.
a little bit more comfortable. And so trying to like bridge the gap between how students can actually have these conversations with, if they don't feel like, even if the counselor is a good person or whatever, that
Yeah.
it's still scary to go talk to it.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to add on to that with two quick things. First of all, the Dane County Youth Assessment, if you haven't ever taken it in school, it can be a bit of an uncomfortable experience because you are sitting at a table with your peers, answering questions about your mental health and your socioeconomic background and your sexual activity and all this stuff. And when you have somebody looking over your shoulder, you're not always gonna answer to like the full, like, yeah. So just something to be aware of. I do really agree with what you're saying about students know that resources exist, they just don't want to access them. Partially because when you go to high school and your counselor is covering so many people, there's not always a personal like connection with that person, or like you don't know them. So even in the context of the conversations I had with the different students, when we talked about mental health and we were talking about the trusted adult that they would go to, it was oftentimes like a social worker or a BRS or somebody that's been assigned to their case that like is continuously following up with them.
Okay.
But like for me, I don't have someone like that. So if I'm like having a rough day, I'm gonna go gossip with like one of the teachers that I know pretty well. So I don't know. Does that like kind of align with what you guys are saying? Not to.
Yeah, what Megan's also saying, something that's in addition to it is that the way that meetings with your counselor have to be scheduled rather than it's like, oh, well, if I need immediate help, then I can't exactly just go because there's no guarantee your counselor will be there. And sometimes you want to go, but you don't want to go and ask around, hey, my counselor here. Like, I think that also prevents people from going to get it.
Okay, thank you so much for that. You know, I know at one point, or at least a few years back, I don't know if it's still around, there was a group that was doing peer-to-peer mental health. And they were like actually training young people to kind of lead some of these kind of conversations through like a peer-to-peer model. Are we, I don't know, are we?
Yeah, I don't,
doing
we don't
anything
have,
that?
to mind, we have a couple of schools that have really explored that and it's kind of petered out because they couldn't find a way to like sustain it, right? Like we had, and a lot, there's been some programs and some money available to like get it started. But then a staff person changed, right? Like your champion leaves or whatever. So, so we have explored it and I agree that it is one of the next frontiers that we need to 100%. And we haven't quite figured out that sustainability plan. So yes.
Okay, because I really appreciate the fact that like it can be intimidating. So like we're like all into like wanting to make sure that like the counselors are there, you've got your school-based health centers and this. And we want those resources to be there, but at the end of the day, like if students are like a little leery of like walking in that door. Yeah, I'm just thinking about the power of other young people, you know, helping to raise the awareness and maybe be available in some other ways. And then my other question, I think this is more for you, Kristen. You had said something earlier about, you know, one of the ways to increase the coping and reduce the stress is to also help teach some of the coping, right? And I guess I'm super curious at the secondary level. What are we doing around teaching young people, like how, like coping, even like helping to destigmatize some of the ideas about like, we all have mental health, right? And here are some ways that you can cope, like what does that look like between?
Yeah, I'll get us
high
started,
school?
but then there's some exciting new developments. I'm gonna turn over to Leah. We
Okay.
definitely are always thinking about that through things like more traditional ways, like, right? Like, like we are always thinking about like, how do we bring the DCYA data back to health class and think about them, like what content we want to shift or like what skills we want to like add. So like, there's some of those like more traditional spaces that we continue to like really think about. And I know Leah and I were just talking about like this morning or no, not yesterday. That
would have been fun.
recently. Yeah. Just about like some ways that we've been doing some intentional connections with some of our secondary folks and our curriculum instruction folks. So.
Yeah, so we are really thinking, because a lot of what I heard, especially in what Megan shared, is really, it's about the environment we're creating, how we're interacting, those relationships, how we're talking to kids, those sort of things. And so really thinking about how our overall approach to teaching and learning really centers those ways of being. And so we are working really closely with our colleagues in curriculum instruction and thinking about where there are really concrete intersections between social, emotional, mental health and well-being and academics, and how we kind of better integrate our professional learning and our overall approach, so that those things become part of our ongoing teaching and that rhythm that we're thinking about. So we're thinking about that more systemically, and at the same time, some of what Kristen shared, there are other intentional efforts that are happening, but really, we really want to hear and understand and really dig in more to what's happening in the classroom and how we can make a bigger impact in teaching and learning as it relates to mental health and wellness, but also the intersection between mental health and wellness.
And middle school advisory too.
Yeah, so-
Sorry.
Oh.
So what I was gonna say is,
Oh, that
with
was good.
middle school advisory, which every one of the schools has, they have explicit mini lessons or teaching of coping skills and other mental health supports. When you get into high school, with the exception of school at Capitol High that has a built-in advisory, or Shabazz has a built-in advisory, but our comprehensive high schools, they don't have that. So finding the spaces to do more of that direct teaching around some of these coping skills, mental health kind of mini lessons. I don't think we have found the right spaces and the right places to ensure that that happens for all students, right? At elementary, kids have, you know, their morning routine,
Right.
doing all those mini lessons. As they go up in the grades, it becomes more difficult. It's one of the reasons we were intentional about advisory at middle school. But high school is a different one. And then there's just one other thing I want to mention, before I know other board members have questions. Going back to, Nichelle, your questions and what we just heard from brilliant young people around kind of thinking through ways to receive services. We know we have a partnership with UW Health that we shared where we have therapists in the schools, but Dr. Gothard and I are part of, we really just started convening a couple months ago, all of the leaders of the health organizations across the county. So public health is in that space. GHC, Access, UW Health, SSM, so we're trying to put our heads together to think about other mental support across that continuum, how our schools and like, and so I think what we just heard today is really good ideas to take back, that we're hearing a lot of the peer-to-peer supports are just as important as these more skilled professionals as well. So I think that's something that.
In fact, we met last week with students, and I want to share this with you.
Yeah, we did.
And just said that what I appreciated about this is it puts mental health in your words. So many times we read things or we do things or say things, it's in our words. This is really. I'll read this and think of places really well. I'll be a public subscriber.
I think the last thing I'll end with is, I appreciate so much hearing how through your newsletter, through the work that you've been doing, you have an ultimate goal, right, of wanting to destigmatize, mental health. I also think about the diversity of our high schools. And when you talk about destigmatizing, that's even more true for many of our students. And it does make me wonder, like, as we have the investments that we have, like, what is the other lens that we need to bring? And who are the other students that we need to hear from? No disrespect to y'all, about more students who more traditionally come from communities, that would not want to access kind of mental health services for sure. And how do we ensure that we're doing our best to try to make what we have available culturally relevant? cause I think that's another whole piece to like the stigma. For sure. So I don't know if you all have done any initial work on trying to get some perspective from students or even the clinicians that are in our schools about how are we making this feel culturally relevant and accessible? Our students are very diverse.
I would say a few things that over to, I know Megan, when she was doing her interview, was intentional about making sure the students that she heard from were diverse, but I think two other things. We recently have started to join, I don't want to get the name wrong, the BIPOC Mental Health Council.
It's very close.
That is just in, one of the members of LCA, the Latino Consortium for Action, connected us, and so there's a BIPOC Mental Health Council that
Okay.
we are connecting with that we think is really important to make sure that any of the adults that we're bringing into the space also are representative of our student population. Our partnership with UW specifically for our psychologists in terms of ensuring that we are increasing the psychologists of color through that program is another way, but I'll turn it over to probably Kristen and the team just to share where else. But I agree with you, the perspectives of our students and the destigmatizing is really important.
Yeah.
And having adults that also represent our students.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is like a really key point. And I think like the research that we've referenced with our UW colleagues, like I think I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the largest sample size was from Black students. So we are getting voice like through these different samples.
Okay.
And I think that there's ways that we should probably be almost like oversampling, right? Like I think there's some, so I think like we have a start. But I think that we have to kind of continue. The students are really doing some thinking about who's planning the wellness fair and really thinking about like how do they invite students who are coming from Black Student Union. Like they've got a whole list of students that they very intentionally are thinking about how do we bring into leadership. So they're using that as a launching pad to like make sure we've got more representative student voice, those arenas. Anything you want to add to that?
In addition to the organizations we want to invite to these mental health fairs, we want to invite the students and the clubs to collaborate and kind of have a voice in the fair and talk about mental health in their communities, because we know it varies.
And also the April, like, I don't know, like conversation or whatever that we want to have. We're gonna invite people from different groups within the different schools to come help us sort of plan and get those different.
Yeah. Appreciate that.
We've also dipped our toes into some things like working with the UW Preventative Science. I always say the wrong group, but like they have a community advisory board, and so we sat down and we shared all of our CBIS materials with them and said, as a parent, what is this like getting these like permissions? So like, you know, we just really recognize that there's layers upon layers of this work that just needs to keep happening. But yes, exclamation point to everything that you said.
Yeah. Appreciate that. Okay, don't be mad at me, Xavier. Hold on one second. So I was at the Strategic Planning Advisory Council meeting last week, the week before. And I heard a principal talk about a space that his Latino students were asking for. And it was based on what's happening right now. And it, you know, it's like, okay, maybe there's been a club, but at this point, based on just what's out there around immigration, some of the fear, the things that would cause somebody a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety and a lot of worry, right? The students at his particular school were asking for just a space. And I guess I also wonder, like, when there are kind of like pressing immediate things that are coming up that do impact students, do we find that it's mostly like staff might just organize something in the moment, and it's not necessarily part of a bigger universal approach? Or I don't know, how have we been dealing with that?
So I would say it's both and I think.
Okay.
In the moment, many of our principals and school staff, our social workers, our sites and all of that will help. Our village builders, depending on what school it's at, have been really instrumental in kind of pulling that group together. And I think other times they're reaching out to our team, specifically the student staff supports to help organize it. We, as it relates to immigration, we just met today and we're thinking about many lessons that need to happen, additional training around mental health as well, because
Okay.
it is something that we know is very real in our community, and the anxiety and the stress is real. So we've been monitoring that closely, but I think we have both. Where schools just know, like,
Yeah.
I gotta pull a group together, like, we pull a group together and they huddle and they get their people, and other times they will reach out to us. I don't know if you all wanna add anything to them. Sorry.
Yeah, and we continue to monitor like where some of our curriculum needs to change. So like we have a stress and coping group that we are really working to there's some national curriculum that is available for students who have experienced immigration stress. So, you know, there's like the what needs to happen just every day. And then there's also the like for students who need something a little bit more. We've been working with some of our community partners to make sure that that curriculum is available and doing some training with staff around that as well. So kind of, we kind of catch it at multiple levels.
Great, thank you. Now I'm done.
Okay, go ahead, board member.
Thank you. For next week operations work group, wondering if we can get the projected ratios for social workers and school counselors through the work process. At least what those are projected at for next week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. And then just kind of a comment or a kind of a different perspective on the issue of cell phones and social media. I do like to think of it as trying to develop a healthier social media hygiene, like up and down the age spectrum. I think a lot of humans have developed a unhealthy dependency on social media for those shots of satisfaction or self-validation, things like that. Developing unhealthy reservoirs of cortisol, things of that nature. So I do think about developing a like social media hygiene kind of instruction thing to mitigate that. Because I do think while there's a balance, if it is able to provide you a sense of comfort, sometimes that's good. Sometimes being able to be focused while uncomfortable is important and forces you to push your character development along too. So being uncomfortable is not necessarily a bad thing, and being able to stay focused in that. And then the last thing about the comment on some students feeling uncomfortable going into the counselor's office. A court ordered that I go to a therapist when I was in 3rd grade, so I was certainly uncomfortable with it. But one thing I knew is that one of the purposes of therapy is to help you develop coping techniques and to help you be able to, on your own, navigate adverse or complicated emotions on your own. So that's kind of the whole purpose of therapy and going to a counselor. So I hope that students are aware of what the purpose of those are. It's not like an immediate fix. That's not the purpose of a counselor, but kind of teaching you how to swim as an analogy, or fish, yeah.
I'm just hearing from students over and over that that first step into that office is hard. And if you've got a friend that can like bridge it for you, or another teacher that you know, like that can bridge it for you, or that you really know how important it's going to be. So you take that step, even though you're feeling a little worried about it, yeah, we can do all the announcements we want to say, hey, we're available, but sometimes it just takes some circumstances to set up to kind of manage that anxiety that goes along with it. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stevie. I see Laura's handing.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking about what might be coming over the next few years. And that we might end up in a period of just extreme stress as a community, and then as individuals with different identities that are being attacked, which is already happening now, right? We have Latinx students that are feeling unsafe and targeted. We have students that are feeling unsafe and targeted. And I think that we can anticipate that that's going to build. And so I'm wondering, as a system, are we looking at putting into place some universal practices around how to support everyone within a period of extreme divisiveness and stress and change?
Do you want to?
Or
do you want me?
Go ahead, you can start.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I think you can't overstate the power of schools being a safe, reliable place for you to show up, then that there's strong relationships and that you feel safe. Like like that, giving that stability, no matter what's coming at us, is powerful. And are there ways that we want to boost up any kind of like ways of continuing to build our schools as that space for our students? I think we should be doing that always, is examining that. And then also, like, I think, you know, we have, and part of why I looked at Leah is that, you know, we have a universal team looking at like, what are the skills that we need? And so, you know, how do we look at sort of our typical like sequence of skills that we're teaching, and like thinking about like, are we teaching the right ones in the right order given the right? So I think the tools are there, but I think there's ways that we can kind of like beef up some of those tools and or like do some intentional looking at those things that are already in place. Yeah, I think, like I said, you know, creating a place of safety in a school is not nothing. And that, you know, when you have a place that you can go and be yourself and feel safe, that will help with all of these things that you're talking about. In addition to, I think, what I'm gonna tee it over to Leah to talk about what the.
Yeah, I think from a universal perspective in our work in general, we're thinking about safe and welcoming schools and environments of belonging. And one of the we think about that from a really like foundational perspective of these are the things that we do always that contribute to and support when there are situational factors that come into place. We are at a point in our history where the universal not necessarily sufficient to clearly address and communicate what we as a school district, what a school, a classroom, like that really explicit and intentional naming of our values, but then also as Cindy referenced, some of those like mini lessons and things that we're really building in to talk about how to get support or validating identity, all of those pieces. So looking at it from both a like, what do we do already and what do we need to do more? And then similarly, as we think about, as we get more intensive with our interventions, we have tier 3, 2 and 3 overall group interventions. And then what more do we need to do as we think about those whose identities are being challenged in a way that is completely not aligned to our beliefs and values and what we believe about our kids and our families.
Laura, I was able to in the last couple of weeks spend, well, it was in restorative circles with students on that Friday.
Yeah.
On Friday. And, you know, it was middle and high school students all throughout the district, and it was really incredible to sit in that space. But what struck me is towards the end, a few students articulate, you know, how was this for you? And it went around. And they said they felt more relaxed. And it wasn't just like to say something. I mean, you could see it in body language. You could sense it in the tone of voice. And it was really powerful for me to just see that space was appreciated in that way. I was visiting an elementary school recently, and I won't name the name, but I got to participate. I heard the PA say Brotherhood group is meeting in, you know, so on, and room, whatever. Well, I ended up being able to go to it. So I got to experience it with a group of 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, maybe 20 of them. And they meet every week. And it was incredible to see their adult talk through them, either what's going on the day or the cycle that they go through to try to connect with one another. And I think something that we overlook sometimes and try to make it really complicated is that I have always found that students really desire connection. to each other, to their staff, to their external community. And anything that we can do to help students connect, big, medium, small groups, I think is a really good step as well. Maybe we could build in some more intentional connection time.
I appreciate that. I mean, I know that, you know, that one really strong relationship often makes a difference in someone's life. And because we can see that this is coming, this is happening, and it's going to get harder.
Yeah.
I think I hear, you know, like a strong awareness of that, and we know that we're gonna need to lean in really strong to those connections and that feeling of safety at school. Now more than we have. for a long time.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Laura. Nikki, I don't know if your hand was raised at any point. I just saw your screen move, so just wanted to give you opportunity if you wanted to. Okay. Shaking head, no? Okie dokie. Well,
Yeah, yes, sorry about that. I just want to thank the students.
okay.
That was it.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'll just also want to thank you all for being with us. I know it's Monday and I know you guys have like ACT days and stuff like that are coming up. So thank you for being here and sharing. Thank you, Nichelle, for your questions because they were very similarly questions that I was gonna ask just about like students in the diverse population of students, whether we are talking about immigrant families and students. There are communities that do not particularly invite the mental health spaces into the community as well. And so it's like, how are we thinking about students and connecting them? One thing that I just want to just reiterate and elevate somewhat is the importance of like the emotional development for elementary students. And I'm thinking more so of when like 3rd through 5th grade, more specifically, because that's when you start to see, we all know, like puberty is like there's a difference in schedules and there's difference in many things that are happening for students. And so one component that I wish we had also focused in on is what we are doing with those students. And then that transition to middle school. And then as Michelle mentioned, then that transition to high school. Because just from as a parent of middle schoolers and high school together, a lot of the things that we were seeing even for my kiddos my kids' friends were things that were happening in 3rd and 4th grade. And then they started compiling into, 5th grade. And then once they got to middle school, everything just kind of fell apart for many students. And then you go to high school. And then so it's like this trajectory of constant, I guess, not awareness around like the emotional development or how to even talk about feelings, how to, it's great to hear that we're doing it in health and focusing in health, but I think it has to be more nuanced than that. And I think it has to be because if students like, I don't want to go to health, they're not going to learn those things. So then how are we kind of integrating that in different ways? And then another comment I would just mention is just when we're thinking about, I know that we have like Journey Mental Health is great Rainbow Project, and we have in some of these community partners, and you all are working with different organizations and health organizations to kind of like figure out what is that because our students are people who are not just only at school, right? And how we're kind of like integrating those pieces. And we hear Dr. Gothard mention like community organizations coming in, and it doesn't have to be mental health ones. So like, how are we, again, investing in those partnerships that allows us to be able to offer those things, even if it's not in a classroom setting. And then I think about just also too, there was sometimes there's comments of like schools can't be everything. And I think that there's some truth to that. And because they can't be everything, that's where we rely on our community
to fill in those gaps for us. And so I would like us to see us lean stronger into that. I think the last thing I'll say is just, I like to know more about the intentional things. I've heard intentional things all night, but I don't know what those actually are. And so I would like to know more about what those intentional things that we are doing as a district, and kind of leaning in on those. And so that we kind of know where those intersections of instruction and mental health are kind of happening, and learning more about those. And then also too, as a board, for us then to take that conversation and be able to make the investments strategically and like what that might look like. I know that we're gonna be having a difficult budgets probably for the next couple years, just because of where we are just nationally. But what that means is then we just have to be very strategic in how we're kind of utilizing our resources for our students, and making those things happen. And yeah, again, much appreciation for you all joining us, and I don't want to keep y'all longer. So if there's no other questions, then we're open
I have a
to,
question. I just want to thank Megan again for all of the work to go out and actually interview folks.
yeah.
And I loved hearing our staff say that we wanna figure out a way to make youth voice not just kind of a sporadic thing, but really building it into the way that we're making decisions. And so thank you for modeling that.
Thank you so much to like everybody in this room, or especially in Kristen, that like, and Leah, that were like on meetings with me, trying to figure out how we were possibly going to make this like, organizing transportation and all of that. So like, thank you so much. This would not have happened without your support and your work outside of all of the stuff you already do. So thank you.
Your dream and your vision.
It was all
Our pleasure.
Megan. And
And
students,
now we can figure it out. Are the middle school students?
They're, yep.
Got a job coming.
she already told her she's coming with me to the middle school interviews. We're going.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much thank you, students again. So appreciate it. And thank you for having us. Thank you, everyone over there on the sideline. Can't happen without all of you as well. Thank you.
So we're just letting folks transition out.
Yeah, Jesse, would you pull up the memo just while we're waiting for the thing?
You can go. Like you're committing your making to go home.
Thank you, Cara.
So much.
Thank you, Lena. Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Appreciate it.
I
Cara,
know
thank
that
you
I
so
heard
much.
about you guys vaguely.
Just toss it.
I want to see your finished product.
Now you don't get that out.
I was coming for that.
I'm not gonna.
Thank you, Cara. Have a great night.
Not throw it.
I guess I probably.
So we're technically not recessed.
No, go for it.
Public, I just want to let you know we're technically not recessed. We're just saying out everyone. Transition out as we move into our next topic, which is the second semester class size report. And it looks like we're going to start with the memo. And I will turn it over to.
I'm gonna invite our assistant superintendent of school leadership to come join us here as well. Everyone has in front of them our memo.
Yeah, we're here.
Everyone has in front of them two documents. It is the memo that we provided to the board that provides key takeaways and an overview around the class size reports that we provide per our class size policy. 2 times a year, we owe the Board of Education a report, both for semester 1 and semester 2, to provide an update as to our average class sizes by level, and then at the secondary level, our class size also by discipline and content area. So this is the second semester report. It is very similar to kind of our overall takeaways that we had in the first semester. A reminder at the K3 level, just at K3, we have schools that are identified as AGR or Achievement Gap Reduction schools. Those schools, we have a different class size, minimum and maximum for them than we do for non-AGR schools. I will also remind the Board of Education that this year, the first year that the board made an intentional, I'm worried about you. Made an intentional, budgetary decision to invest in even smaller class sizes at kindergarten and first grade. Both for our AGR schools and our non-AGR schools. For AGR schools at kindergarten and first grade, we tried to the best of our ability to have class sizes of 15, 16. And our non-AGR for kindergarten and first grade tried to as best as possible have class sizes of 17, 18. So you will see that reflected as well. And so what I'd like to do is orient you to the report itself. And then just to open it up for questions. Jesse, could you pull up the report? So as Jesse's pulling up the report, I will start with the front side. And I'll start with the report on the left-hand side. The left-hand side is our elementary schools. It is divided by AGR schools and non-AGR schools, as I just described earlier. It shows the distribution of the number of sections by grade level that fall within the number of students that you will see at the bottom row. For example, if I look at AGR schools and I look at 4K, it shows that we have one section that has 10 students. At the bottom, so at the bottom of the report, it shows the number of students that will be in each section. And then what you see in the color coding at the top on the left shows the number of sections across all of the schools that have that number of students in it. So if I look at kindergarten and AGR and I see the second kind of box shows a 7. That means 7 of our sections across our AGR schools have a class size of 12. If we go to the right-hand side and I orient you to the right-hand side, on the right-hand side, the middle column shows us the average homeroom size across all of those sections across the grades. So on average at AGR schools, our 4K section is 16.5. Our kindergarten section is 15.2, first grade 15.3, and so on. So that's our middle column. And then all the way, the third column to the left shows the number of sections and the percent based on the different categories we have in our class size policy. A reminder, our class size policy has below minimum, optimal, below maximum, and above maximum. It's important to note that our above maximum doesn't necessarily mean that it automatically triggers another section, or that if we are above maximum, that there is always a need to make changes. There are different complexities that have to be considered, but that is what we use, below minimum and above maximum, as much as possible throughout the entire school year, to make adjustments along the way as enrollment changes. We've talked a lot about our unallocated pool that we use. These are some of the kind of figures that we use when making decisions about where there is a need to make shifts in our allocation. Let me pause to see if there's questions on the elementary side before I turn it over to the secondary side and walk you through the other.
Nikki, is your question in reference to the elementary or just overall? Nikki, you're muted.
It's overall, so I'll wait till the end.
Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Then I will just quickly orient you. This is very similar to what we saw first semester, but I'll just quickly orient you to the second side, because the second side focuses on middle school and high school. which we do the the layout of this a little different than we do at elementary, because it's based on content areas. So if we go all the way over to the left-hand side, you will see that for middle school is at the top and high school is at the bottom. You will notice that it's broken out by content area and or discipline versus by grade level. And then if you go across during the first part of this table, you will see at the very top, it has a class size range. So it shows the student numbers between 10 and 14, 15 to 19, 20 to 24, 25 to 29, 30 to 34, and 34 to 39, all the way up to 40 plus in terms of the number of students per each section. And then it will show you the number of sections across our middle schools in orange and the number of sections across the high schools in blue to show you the range for each content area and the number of students per section across our schools, with the totals at the bottom of each middle school and high school. On the right-hand side, it shows the average class size for each one of those content areas. Both for middle school in the orange color and high school in the blue. I will pause to see if there's questions about the reading of the report before we open it up for conversation.
You have a question for the reading report, go ahead.
Okay, on the middle school and high school, the percentage that's in the parentheses. What's that?
That's the overall percent of total classes or total sections. 5% of the total section are in the 30 to 34 range. So 78 of those, or 5%. For middle
Okay.
school.
So like if we look at art,
Uh-huh.
there are 15 sections with 10 to 14 students in it. And those 15 sections are 16% of the total
Art sections across.
total art sections. Oh, okay.
And then at
okay.
the bottom, it shows you how that distribution is across all subject areas.
Yeah. Oh,
By student rank.
okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Kind of. Yes, it does.
Okay. Any
answered-
other questions about the orientation of the report before we?
Yes.
Yes.
My question is there a possibility we could get this in either a bar graph or in words to see it better? I'm having a real hard time with the lines at the end and seeing it. Is there a way we could change the format at all, or would that be too much?
I don't know the answer to that, board member Vandermeulen, but I can take it back to our AI team and see if there's a different way that they could present the data.
It's not in it, so I just am having vision issues.
That's weird. At this point, I think I would, yeah, for sure.
Okay, so let's open it up for general questions, and Nikki, go ahead.
Yes, one, besides the general report, I'm glad to see that the art numbers are not 30, having multiple sections of 35. I know that had been an issue in the past. What I'm worried about is going to be regarding class sizes, the surplus, there are three things. One, how we surplus staff, I think, needs to be described, and how it relates to the class size. I think people don't understand it. And I think that has caused a lot of undue stress on how these numbers are attached and how these decisions are being made. Second one, I've already stated, and I'm already going to get the average, what am I trying to say? Sorry. Give me a second, brain freeze. Very simply, getting the average cuts and what we're doing and how we're doing it based on population and class size, and I get that. But I think what we need to do is not just to do how many students we think are going to, or that we're having a declining birth rate. I think we need to have a conversation with the community on these numbers, not just the board, but the community as a whole. I think that possibly creating some kind of task force or group so that way that the community feels heard. Because I think every year people panic over this, and I think this is a way to avoid such things. And that's all I have. Oh,
Let me
yeah, actually, one more. Sorry, Chair. And the other one is any, the surplusing of, can we include the surplusing of any, find out the number of any staff that, special ed staff? And that's all I need.
So this is an update about the class sizes. It's not an update about like the staffing ratios. But I think that that could be an email request, Nikki.
Board members, next Monday night at Operations Work Group, we're gonna present. Allocations are still being worked on. There's still decisions that are being made. But I think generally, and Board Member Vandermillen, I understand some themes of what you're asking, and I think one thing that all of us need to know, and it is part of a greater public relations and way we communicate, our city is going through transformative change right now. As evidenced by the number of cranes that are building all over the place. Our city has made a commitment to purchase land for both affordable and mixed housing for further development. There are going to be a lot of changes. And what happens in times of change like that is, as proud as I am of the class sizes we're able to show here, there are some outliers. Because I hear from them, and you likely do too. And we don't have a perfect system yet, where if somebody is far over the class sizes, we don't really have the system to say, you know what, there's a bunch of you who are way under too. You know, let's collapse and move resources. And that isn't to put this on teachers. It's just to say that our system is imperfect. It just is. If we can get to a place where we can build in some flex that has a little bit more predictability, I think we'd all be for that. But the challenges are that our city is changing. And right now, there's two ways that we grow. We either grow at schools by intermigration, where students, the same students are going to different schools, causing enrollment fluctuations, or it's net new migration. So new families coming to MMSD. You all know that we were projected to be down 400. Instead, we're up 200, 100 at third Friday, September, another 100 in January. We monitor it all the time. But the challenge is students don't come in grade level packages of 20.
Okay.
They just don't. So, I mean, we're always going to have deviations in our schedule. I think this is a really good foundation and basis to have. I commend you as a board to make this a commitment. And, you know, our team to allocate the resources as best we can. It's an ongoing process, and one in which I think we need to continue to listen to our staff, you know, listen to our community and make sure that our investments are, you know, being used wisely.
Does that suffice, Nikki?
Sorry, laptop issues. Yes, that does.
Okay. And I saw Blair's hand next.
Thank you. Thanks for the report. I have two questions and a comment. My first question is, like, I know you separate the AGR and non-AGR schools, but do you notice other like concentrations of schools where things are way different than other schools? When you're looking at it, like, do you notice that, like, okay, it looks like this for the whole district, but then some schools are way over here and some schools are way over there?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. I'll start and then maybe I'll turn it over to Ms. Stanford if needed. I think there's a couple of places where we see a little bit of maybe outliers, not kind of within the median. I think some of our bilingual programs, depending on the size of the student population, can show either on the high end or on the low end. Our Hmong bilingual program, depending on the grade level, our end is it's a brand new program that we're continuing to build. I also see places where our enrollment has just continued to increase, so we have some schools that have grown more, probably faster than we have been able to always plan for, so I think that you will see that sometimes on the high end, and I think that's one of the reasons why we try to keep back what we call this unallocated pool to make adjustments throughout the year. But those are a couple spaces. I think the other is, you know, our class size policy allows for 40 students in special areas. Those special areas can be music, high ed, and depending on the school and the way they're scheduling, sometimes people take full advantage of that. And so I think that's just another place where, based on our current policy, sometimes see higher numbers.
Okay, thanks. I heard you talking about.
Oh, I was
just gonna add last thing that the other piece that we are seeing that's contributing is the housing patterns right now. And so some of our schools who have traditionally been more stable in their numbers are actually going up a lot higher than where they were previously. And we're seeing that at some of our non-AGR schools, where they again had more stable numbers of enrollment. But now those numbers are going up.
So you do see some concentration, but the reasons why are plain to you.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Can you talk a little bit, can someone talk a little bit about like what kind of considerations I've heard you say like lots of considerations go into it. Can you talk a little bit about like what kind of considerations, like how much does like available space play into it? Is there any, like, I know for high school, like, is there schedule considerations that go into it that like adjusting a schedule thing could use some of it? Like, what are the kinds of things that go into these decisions? Whoever is the most,
at all the details, but there's a lot of different considerations. Scheduling is a big thing for middle school and high school, and when you're to offer those, going back to housing patterns that we're seeing that are changing. We also give consideration for transition that a school might be having at this time. So if they're transitioning with a principal and there'll be a new principal, there's consideration for that as well. There is, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think course selection matters. So at high school and really our middle schools are starting to do this as well. Kind of the voice and choice with students, both what they need for requirements, but also what they're choosing, plays a big factor into this. I think the other things that we've been really taking into consideration the last few years is some of the complexities, such as schools that might be title funded, schools that we look at their data in terms of their literacy proficiency data, their math proficiency data, as well to think about that, where we want to do a better job of allocating resources to the greatest needs versus kind of a universal approach, or a few other things.
ATSI schools.
The schools that are identified as, yeah, ETSI, yeah.
okay. Last part of this question is like, I guess it's a question about like how workbook allocation turns into class size. Cause like you, in your work, you say, hi, school number one, we have FTE for 4 of this and 4 of this and 5 of this and 4 of this. Kind of. Or do you say, we have all these teachers that you can work at your school, you figure out how many are first graders and third graders? Like, can you talk a little bit about where the leadership at the school level meets the leadership at the district level for this kind of stuff?
Sure.
Staff or maybe start projected or.
Oh.
Say that one more time.
Projected.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we start with the projected enrollment of a school. And so how many students do we think are going to be at the school? And then the allocations are given based on that. There is flexibility with principals as far as how they can use some of that allocation in the building. So in elementary, if there's a class size where you might want to have your third grade in a lower class size than your fifth grade, the principal has the ability to give an additional allocation to the third grade section and have the fifth grade section be a larger class. And they take a lot of things into consideration, such as students that are in in those sections and, you know, what the needs are at that time.
Okay.
Middle school and high school have a flex pool. And so they have to use their allocation to do their schedules based on core first, and then full of allocation that they can flex based on the needs again of students and selections of classes.
Okay, and then like in middle school then, it would be the principal and their team being like, okay, we're gonna run this art class really big so that we can. Okay,
Yes.
okay, cool. Thank you for answering my questions. Did you wanna add, or you think it's covered?
I figured.
I think so too. Are you sick? Yes. Oh no, I hope you feel better. Thank you for all of your course answers, especially. And then my other thing is just a comment. And I'm thinking about the presentation that we just saw about supporting student mental health and things I heard people say. Like I heard we had a peer-to-peer model that was really cool. And then, you know, things happen, a staff member leaves and it's all gone. And I'm thinking about, maybe Cindy, you said like, oh, there's a need because a particular community is, or maybe you said it, Dr. Gothard, I can't remember. That's good. It means you're like working in tandem really well, I guess. We have a community need that's like really urgent. And so someone pulls a group of students together, or like the brotherhood meeting, right? It's over the PA at lunch. Like these are things that are so important for students and are possible by the like non-contracted capacity of adulthood. Like that's not part of a person's job description for the most part. And so when I'm thinking about class sizes, like I think that the averages look really good. And like, and I'm eager to see what you're talking about as the system gets better worked out. But like, we're talking about like 1,500 social studies students or like 1,000 math students who are in really big classes. And like the carryover effects of that social studies or math or English teacher having to be like, you actually can't come in my room at lunch. Like I can't. Like I've got, you know, 170 students who I'm like showing up for all day. And so I just want to make sure that and I know that we all are, but like those connections are really, really matter. And then I guess, to again, tie back to the last part, which I know was about student mental health. I've been thinking a lot about like the like emotional presence and the like inner strength and calm that like an adult needs to go into a classroom with to be effective with students. Like it just doesn't work when you go into a classroom and you're like tired or pissed off or like all these things that are like normal adult things that like to be good in the classroom, you have to like manage. And in order to manage that, you need a certain amount of like quiet time or like non-maxed outedness. And so I'm just like thinking about the ways those things fit together a lot. And I'm interested in what you were saying about building in flex and what happens when a system is able to move people more fluidly where they're needed. I'm super curious to hear more about that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Blair. Any other questions? Laura?
Yeah, so a follow-up to that. So I just keep looking at this 40+ number for gym for middle school, and I'm trying to picture 40+ middle school kids in a gym with one adult. Is that what we're saying here? Is there another adult that comes in? Like, are we flexing right now when we have these groups that are twice the size of other gym classes? What are we doing?
I'd have to look specifically at the section noted there. I mean, I have had some very large physical education courses in the past, and some have had support and some have not. It just depends on how the schedule works out and what available teacher allocation there is at that school.
And space.
And space as well, right?
Okay.
Thank you.
So when you think about this sort of in theory moving forward, what do you want something like that to be? These larger classes that in theory are more manageable because there's not much one-on-one needed, but that are very large.
I think we have to look at also student choice. So a lot of times it's dictated by that, and it's wanting to ensure that students get their first or second choice. And sometimes depending on how that skews, it creates some of those abnormalities that are outside of our purview. So again, we would have to either look at disrupting and adding allocation to in middle school, it's sometimes called a wheel, elective wheel, and what's offered at each period of time, and having the space to do that, or having new courses that we're interested in outside of that, in addition to meeting DPI, state requirements as well. And we could break that down too, and just kind of share that that's our base allocations also based on that. What do we have to offer by DPI standards?
Do you have an inclination on where to go when you're seeing, these not an insignificant number of courses at the middle school and high school level that have students in them? Around like what direction are you gonna want to take as you?
I would need to learn more about what that is. Are they team taught? Is there, is there a reason why they're so large? And
Okay.
what would some possible solutions be? I don't know that I would have it directly. I would want to know, from the schools, what solutions do you have in mind and what can we do?
Okay, thank you. The last thing I'll say is I know I won't be here to discuss it, but I know that the board members all have the draft policy that I created around 4K class size. So I'm really hoping that that can become a discussion.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Laura. Any other questions around class sizes?
I do think it's worth noting, everyone, kind of the elephant or whatever animal you want in the room, but with the changes that we're seeing in our city right now, we are going to have to do some boundary review. We just are, and these might not be solid line boundary reviews. I mean, there's so many changes that we are gonna have to just develop a way that we can respond to some of the needs that we have. And I think everybody is also for smaller class sizes too, but remember the discussion back in Ref 24, where we've got enrollment, we have capacity, we have utilization. And those numbers are like these exact things. But if we use our schools differently, if class sizes are smaller and we need more sections, we need more rooms, if we want sensory space, if we want some of the things that makes Madison a unique and a school district that responds to the students, the needs that our students have, then we just have to know that going in. It's been a far different experience designing brand new schools because we can kind of create them based on some of the flexibility that we need. When we look at our same schools that exist, it's really difficult to move walls. So these are all things that are on my mind as we thought MMSD of the future, especially at the rate of potential growth that we have. And I think we need to do a great job with that, but we're also going to have to start engaging in what boundary review looks like. And we've got a few areas, and we'll talk about this in the coming weeks with you. We've got a few areas we'd like to start, but as a practice, we want to get really good at this because it isn't going to be over this spring or next fall or even next spring.
Yeah.
That's
It's an added plot twist, but it's a necessary one, and I think it's something that I've thought about a lot too, and just about as it relates to just the class sizes and how we're kind of also ensuring that that those anomalies that we're seeing based off of like concentration of like housing and such throughout the city and what that looks like for certain schools and groupings of schools, and then the boundaries, and then also I'll say it too, is that all the other school districts are thinking the same, right? And so it's a conversation I think we have to do with fidelity but be steadfast
As we are thinking about that and how it relates to our schools and the growth that we're possibly going to be experiencing fairly soon. So
Yeah.
with,
No, I was just gonna say, I wanna add on two things. One, kind of to your question, Laura, but also to what Dr. Gothard said. I think, one of, not the only, but one of the complexities is as you get into the secondary level, our schools want to offer as many opportunities as they can for students. And offering as many opportunities as you can for students also creates challenges with being able to think through the allocation, the schedule, everything else. And we are a district that likes to ensure that everybody has everything, and I just don't know that you can continue down that path. So there are gonna be some decisions that schools and students and families make about what those course offerings are and are not. And then also the ability to have some flexibility to what Dr. Gothard just mentioned in terms of a boundary review and what that might mean in terms of how we have to think about the future of such things like our class size, our allocation and all of that as well. So just the future.
the near future.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if there's no other questions or comments, before I entertain a motion to adjourn for this part of the meeting, I just wanted to clarify, Laura, you were online when I did the minutes. And I thought I heard you say aye.
You did.
Okay, so we're good on the 6-0. I just wanted to make sure that I clarified that.
Yep.
To make sure I didn't miss you on. And so with that, I will entertain. a motion to
So,
adjourn. Okay, so moved by Savian, a second by Blair. All those in favor to adjourn, aye. Okay, that's 6-0.
And I have
Thank
to
y'all,
leave
have a
early.
good night. And yes,
I have to miss the second meeting. Sorry, Chair.
You're not coming to the closed session?
Okay,
Okay.
Nikki, thank you for letting us know.